Do you ever wish you could think about money differently? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, this is Jill from the North Woods, trying to make life better, one small step at a time. You know, you might think about the fact that you're not making enough money, or if you ever wondered, how are you going to save for the things that you've always dreamed of, going to or doing or buying? And too many people spend money that they earn to buy things they don't want to impress people they don't like. That's a Will Rogers statement, and I thought that's really pretty good. I read a book a couple of years ago by Tiffany Aliche, who is also known as the Budgetnista. She's amazing. I think she has a YouTube channel and she had a podcast. She still has a podcast, and it's called Get Good with Money. And I like this book so much. Like I said, I'm sort of drawing for some of my older podcasts once in a while to talk about one that really stood with me. And this is one of them. I wish I had this book back when I was having so much difficulty with money. No matter how many times my friends tried to talk to me about money or I tried to think about money, it caused me to panic. It caused me to, I don't know, I just hated anything to do with money. And it caused stress in my life. It made me not sleep at night. I was not paying my bills. I was poor most of my life. And I was wondering, what am I going to do about it? And, friends would come to me and say, Jill, you have to start saving for retirement. You're going to have nothing. And I thought, how can I do that when I'm not even paying my bills? I was nervous about money every time. And you just ask any of my friends. I didn't have a great savings account. I didn't have an emergency savings account. They would try to talk me into that. And I'm like, I can't handle that right now. And I just either operated in two different ways. I would panic about money or I would avoid it and just pretend it didn't exist. Either one of those two directions. And I finally got over those things. And now I'm absolutely able to talk about it in logical ways, which is great. My past dealings with bad money finally, settled out. And I was able to gain some perspective. This book would have helped me because the way that she explains it is in a very practical, easy to do way of working with money. And that's why I think this book is just great. So if you're having struggles with money, I think this is a good place to start. It's written in a very friendly way. It's a very human way, a very human method of dealing with budgets. And I think that she gives you the groundwork so that you can start to save money, get your bills paid, eventually invest in money, and then, start saving for everything else, the trips or whatever else that you're looking for. She covers a lot of ground. And I found that this book was very easy to read, but it was also, I enjoyed reading it, which, like I said, for me and money, that was very hard. I used to just panic all the time. She said, I'm literally yelling at 20-year-old Tiffany right now. She's yelling at her own self, just like I would be yelling at my own self. And that experience, is sometimes we look at a different version of ourselves and wondered, how did this happen to me? How did we get there? How did I even think about things back then? I mean, right now, like I said, I'm going through a lot of my stuff in my house and, tossing things, giving them to charities, that take in stuff. And I said, oh, what was I thinking when I bought this? Or what was I thinking when I bought that? And it's a little depressing because you're tossing out things that you had big dreams for. And then it ended up you didn't really do anything with them. And that's kind of a bummer. But it's a skill we can get better at. That's the biggest thing. You can get better at it. And when it comes to money, you have to surround yourself with positive reinforcements. Set everything up in a way that makes you successful, that will help you to do the things that you want to do. And she says, don't freak out about money or the mistakes that you've made. They're in the past. I think that depressed, like I said, I'm throwing things out in the house and I say, oh my gosh, why did I buy this? What am I even using this for? And it could get depressing and say, man, I don't know what it is. I spent $17 on this and I don't even know what it is, and you can get depressed about it. But she says, you know what? It's over with. It's done in the past. You've already done it. There's no point in going back and getting depressed about it. Just go forward doing better. She said that you should look to consider becoming what she talks about as being a towel person. Like, let's say that water is spilled on the floor in your kitchen. You don't freak out. You go get a towel and you wipe it up. and then it's done with. It's over with. There's no freaking out. You're not getting mad at the floor. You're not getting mad at the person who spilled it. You're just done with it, right? You just wipe it up and go and move on to the next thing. When we get better at money, it means that we have to really understand what it means to us, how it affects our moods and our emotions. And it's not what she says, even magic. This particular point is not about even becoming rich or retiring early or going on that dream vacation. It's becoming a solid person who doesn't have anxiety about money all the time, who has a good relationship with money. And when that happens, the rest falls in line. So the very first part that you have to do is realize that you have to understand what are your influences with money. A lot of times it comes with our early, family, growing up. My earliest memory was that my parents never had money to pay bills, no matter how much relatives helped us and no matter how many paychecks came in, immediately it was gone and we were poor again. We couldn't pay our bills. We were deep in credit card debt. We were fretting about how many bills we had. And it was stressful. How are we going to pay our taxes? What happens when this car, breaks down and I don't have the money to fix it? There was never money there. It was all about unhappiness and fear. And when I grew up then, I panicked about money. I really didn't believe I would ever have a good future with money. And it's just about surviving the bills, trying to, to get to the next thing. And this is where she says that we need to figure out exactly how this money plays an image in our brain. In her first chapter, she talks about like sort of basic budgeting. And the budgeting is a downright scary word. And it's going to ruin my fun. I'm not going to enjoy myself. I can't go on the trip I want to have. I can't, go buy the new iPhone I want to have. And I'm never going to have any more cool experiences again. And it's the wrong way to think about it, because what you're trying to do when you're trying to budget or look at it is you're just trying to have an honest view with it. That's all. There's no freak out. It's just trying to be honest about that situation. I mean, honestly, when I got out of college, my first job was like making $6 and a quarter as an office person. And I was just dirt poor. I couldn't afford anything. And it was going downhill quickly for me. And I would freak out, but I just avoided looking at a budget. I didn't want to look at my numbers. I was just sort of like Frogger. I was just hopping from island to island to pay this bill. Okay, now I'm going to pay this bill. And I was just trying to pay the next bill and hope that I had enough left over to do it. In her budgeting system, she's very low-key about it. It's not about driving every dollar into a ledger and categorizing every money going in and out. She said that basically you can write it out, you can put it, in your computer. But the idea is that you have just some idea of how much money is going in and out. That's it. And then if you can automate, with some sort of app, like figure out what exactly your money's going. So if you could type it into something and it could help figure out what it is, that will help you out and make it a little bit easier for you. And when you're figuring out your budget, you never get to the part where you say, okay, now I figured out my budget and I'm done. You do it slowly, you do it reliably, and so that it's not going to be a problem, and you sort of know where directions are going. There's going to be good days and bad days. There's going to be a day when you get a bonus, and there's going to be a day when you got a birthday gift or, something like that. And there's going to be days where you got a horrible bill. It's about doing this in the long term and doing it very slowly. And she points out that the way that I used to do budgeting, which wasn't budgeting at all, like I said, I would think about all the money going in and coming out. And then I would say, well, I have this much money to spend, on food, on my car, and the gas bill, and the electrical bill, and the rest is mine. I can do whatever I want to. And that is not really how budgeting works, because the general framework of it looks like something that you can do a little bit better. And she even says in this quote, I like this quote, you can do better. Better budget is built from the bricks of fact and the figures of your finance. And that's where she says the good news comes in, is you already have everything you need to do in order to create our very first budget. The first time we get a close relationship with our money, it's when we don't treat it like a terror in our lives, like I used to treat it as a terror in my life. It's about knowledge. And once you have knowledge about where your money's going and how much money you're coming in, even if the lines don't equal up, now you can do something about it because you know what it is. When you don't know what it is the scary monster in the corner. So that's the very first step, is just knowing what it is. You get a salary, you get some other kinds of income, you write it down, maybe you get a bonus, like I said, you get some gifts, throughout the year, maybe, you had a payout from a settlement or something like that. Write it all down, what is coming in. And then where's the money that's going to go out, the expenses that are coming out of it? What does it cost to live day to day with food and the electric bill and the cable bill and clothing and gifts that you give out in the year? What credit cards do you have? And, that just knowing those general types of things, also think about like memberships. That was the thing that always got me. Periodic charges that might come in once a year. Think about those details too. And what's nice is there's a lot of banks out there that record all this information for you, and you can export the data out of it and, maybe put it into an Excel spreadsheet or something like that. So it's very easy to read so that you can kind of sort out where exactly your money is going. I remember that when I first got started with budgeting, a lot of my bills, or a lot of the money that I had was going out of I called it the cash fund, but it wasn't cash. It was going to Target, and I would buy things in 20 different categories. I had no idea. Some of it was food, and some of it was housing, like the little knickknacks on the back of my counter there. And it was hard, and I didn't really know. And so that was the biggest fund. It was just general. I bought this on Amazon. I bought this on Target. I don't really know what it was even. I don't remember how much of it was food. But again, if you can kind of get into streamlining the money. Like I said, do you buy flowers for you? Do you go out with your friends? Try to capture everything, at least initially, so you can just take a look at it and know where that money is going. Nice thing is like I said, there are a lot of systems out there that can help you and a lot of apps out there that can help you. And then she says, you have to calculate exactly what the costs are on a monthly basis. So if every year, I took my cats to the vet, it costs $120, that's $10 a month. So that's easy to calculate. Where we're having trouble then, or where it's usually more difficult, is where we have invisible funds, that just go out every year. I always sort of looked at those things as mysteries, like, oh no, I have a big cat bill coming up. It wasn't a mystery. I know I take my cat to the vet every May. I knew it was coming. I knew it was going to happen. Or every time we get extra money, like, maybe Christmas gifts, or, we get money for Christmas gifts, we're like, woo, and we don't calculate that as part of our budget. This is the part where she says we have to face the music, and we have to provide a nice environment because it's going to be stressful when we first do this. She goes, maybe light a candle, play some calming music, and then start adding that money up and start seeing where it is. Maybe you can start looking to see where you could actually start saving some money. Oh, do you have a Netflix account you're just not watching? Maybe you cancel it, that kind of thing. And now you've created your first budget, and you can honestly work with that. Like I said, if you want more information, definitely get her and read her book. But now you know where you stand. And so then the next step is to sort of assign these to different categories. And she said that those categories are going to be bills, B for bills. Those are going to be things like credit cards, loans, utilities, mortgage, the tax bill that comes in. These are standing bills that you have all the time. And the reason they go into the same category is you don't have any control over them. They come in, you can't do much about it. I can't change my mortgage. I can't change my tax bill, so we'll talk a little bit about later. But then there are some bills that we have a little bit of control over. And those might have to do with a lot of activities that we're doing, things that we can control. We can control how much electricity we use. We can control how much, the credit cards, whether they're going up or they're going down. She calls these UBs. These are going to be usage bills. And those are important because they can even slow you down a little bit. But you can control some of that money. You can save money here and there. And then there's C for cash, and those are going to be expenditures that don't mean anything in particular. They're not bills. They're not regular. Oftentimes, there's something that you have to do. Like I have to go get food. I have to get a haircut. I'm going out with friends. I'm having some entertainment. And those are things that you may have control over. You all need some food, but you do have a high level control over how much money goes into this particular category. So now once you have placed all these bills into these kinds of categories, now you can do some sort of analysis. you can look at them and say how much is going into most of them. She said, like I said, most of the money that are going in for B for bills have no control. The UBs, the usage bills, have some control, and the Cs you have a lot of control over. And there's some negotiations that you can do with yourself, some limiting that you can do with yourself so that you don't have those expenditures quite the way that you did. The C category is a very flexible category of money. And usually, like I said, you can control how much goes in and out of that, category. So anyway, you go through and you start looking at the list and you start seeing where it is. These expenses, usually in the C category are the ones that are getting you down. They might mean that you don't go out and eat as much as you want to. It means that maybe you cancel some of the subscriptions that you have, and you're trying to keep it not to be as painful as it is. But sometimes it is a little bit painful. But when you reduce those, you start getting that money back, and life starts getting a little bit easier. I used to have, cable television. I was spending $220 a month on cable television. I had the best internet. I had all the TV channels, and it was taking a lot out of my budget back in the day. I did what a lot of people did. I cut the cord and I got rid of cable. I have internet, and I did, streaming. I watched things I already bought. I watched things that were available to me. And when I did that, suddenly, my money was a lot more available. At first, it was a little difficult, because you were used to having your recordings. You could record TV shows, and you're used to what you had and what you didn't have, and it took some adjustment. But you know what? In the end, 3 months after that, I never thought about it. Someone was talking about that they, just got rid of the phone and cable, which is much later now than it was back then. And I'm like, dude, I did it 20 years ago. I never looked back. I never once thought about it again. And once I did it, the other part too is I didn't want to watch as much television. I wanted to start doing things that actually produced things, like doing the podcast and stuff. And it got better. And like I said, after a few months, I never even thought about it again. When I went into the office, I would see a lot of people who would come in with Starbucks. They'd go out for lunch. They would go pick up something for dinner, and that they were constantly going out to eat money. And when you're trying to control your money, that is a huge expenditure. And not only that, I was trying to lose weight. And so that double whammy of putting on weight and spending too much money was right there in me eating out all the time. Because it's, kind of funny. I dated this guy, and he wanted to eat out every meal. He was just like someone who loved to eat out. And I said, look, our problem is that we weigh too much and we're too broke. This would solve both problems, right? And probably why we broke up. I was probably a little bit too pragmatic for him. But the idea is that you can find ways of saving money that can be some pretty big punches in there that are just lopping off some things, that are just soaking up money left and right. And you might say, oh, it's only $14 and it's only $3. This only adds up to this or that, but stuff adds up, for sure. I remember I stopped drinking Diet Coke. I was a big Diet Coke addict. I was drinking a ton of it. And at one point, I sat there and figured out how much I was spending a year on Diet Coke. And it was incredible. I mean, like I said, it wasn't budget breaking, but it was enough money that it'd make you kind of go, oh, that's, pretty terrible. The other thing is you can look at too, like, do you have a car that is, costing you too much gas? If, maybe you have, you go on this particular vacation every year with your family and it just costs, too much money. Once you start looking at the C charges about what it is, then you start looking at the UB charges, again, those usage bills, what can go down? Do I have to, use as much gas in my car as I am? Do I have to use as much electricity or even as much heat? I live in a very cold area, but a lot of times people pump their house full, very toasty warm, which is really nice. But, it costs a good deal of money to do that. And so it might be a little bit of pain there. And then you look at the Bs, and the Bs are going to be the ones that are going to be harder to deal with because you don't have a lot of control. But that might be when interest rates go down, maybe you refinance your mortgage. When I first bought this house, my interest rates, I forgot what they were. I think they were up at like around 9%. And I ended up refinancing all the way down to 4%. And that saved me a tremendous amount of money over the long run, and it took a little bit of work and it took, the nerves of signing all the mortgage payments again. But I was able to reduce that. Or car payments, is there a way, I think that someone I knew bought a car and she bought a very expensive car on lease. And at some point, she was talking about how she was having a lot of struggles with money. And I said, what about just buying a used car and not leasing these really nice cars anymore? You'd probably save, and I think it came out to about $400 a month that she was saving by doing it. And she didn't want to do it because she liked having the car. But essentially, you're going to go through, and like I said, it can be a little bit painful, but in the long term, it's going to save you. Even one suggestion she had in this book is she says, call your insurance company, see if you can get a different rate. Call your gym, see if there's a better situation you can get into. When you start analyzing the bills and just asking the questions, or maybe even asking the question, do I even have to pay for this thing at all? Or even asking the question, if I don't do this thing I'm doing, am I going to be unhealthy or unsafe? That's going to tell you a lot of answers right there. So asking the hard questions and doing a little bit of digging is going to be a big part of them. If the cable company is going to be, angry with you if you don't pay the bills, like to, get your internet, whatever internet service provider you have. So maybe if you go to another internet service provider, you get a lot more value for your money. Maybe if you pick someone else, you might not get the highest speed in the world, but you're doing pretty darn good and you cut your bill in half. So again, that's the idea, is that you keep doing that. But the idea, she says, really in all of this is that the worst thing you can do is go dark on your budget. You don't communicate with your creditors if you are in a bad situation. You owe a lot of money. It sounds scary, but the idea is that they're mostly concerned you're going to fade away. You're going to ghost them. And as long as you usually keep in communication with your creditors, with the companies that you're at, it might be scary to call your insurance company and say, hey, is there a way I can save money? They're not the mafia. You stay calm about it, and you're working on this in a very rational way. And if you're in really a bad condition, they may have to wait, while you're getting things in your proper order. But once you get your budget into a proper order, then they're willing to give you grace a lot of times. There's a lot of flexibility to be had if you work with people. Like I said, if you're in a particularly bad situation, you don't have enough money, they're angry when you go quiet. They're not angry when you're talking to them. So just kind of keep that in mind. But that's where they start, sending the collectors in for you if you're in a really bad situation. But, like I said, once you know where you're at, now you can start working on that budget and you can start communicating with the people you owe money to. She says the last step is, and I really like this idea, is that you separate your money. And she thought that everyone should have 2 checking accounts and 2 savings accounts. And I actually did take this piece of advice. So, and she even said that they can be at different institutions if you really want to, or you can have them at the same. I have mine in the same institution. And like I said, the banks and everything that are usually very friendly, willing to work with you. You can talk to them about this. Online banks, that's another kind of bank. They tend to be really good too now, so there are banks out there, and I have an account like with one of them. I don't even know them. They're not even in my hometown, but they're an online bank. So they usually can give you services with less overhead because there's no real buildings in each individual town. They may have better online services. They may have better rates. So keep in mind that when you're going out and shopping all these things, that you want to keep that, through there. But essentially, there are some really good services out there. Even when I went to refinance my home, I first did it online, and I found a really great place that was better than my own hometown was offering me. So it's wild what you can do when you shop around with these banks. But anyway, she said, too, that credit unions are fantastic. And I love credit unions. She loves credit unions, too. They're nonprofit organizations. And so the money goes back into the organization itself for better interest rates, better loan rates. And so if you can fit within a credit union, that's usually a good thing to do. They usually have rules, like you have to live within a certain county or you have to work within a certain place, and they can help you get sort of the best value for your money. All right. So then she said, so let's go back to that. The different accounts. What are the different accounts? So one of them is the money where your deposits are coming in, right? That's where your paycheck goes. The second account is where the money goes to pay the bills. So it's a separate account. All your hookup fees, like automatic payment fees, you automatically pay your cable bill, you pay your mortgage, you pay your property taxes. Those come out of that particular account. And that means you're protected too. So if someone were to hack that particular account, it doesn't have all your money in it. It just has the money for your bills for that month. So I think that can be, stress relief, because that these, you set up these money transfers so that you can pay your cable bill, you pay out. No one has all access to all your money and access to where your paycheck is. So then that will just be enough money to cover your bills. Like I said, it's a little bit safer. Then you have a savings account. One is used for your emergency savings. And that emergency savings is supposed to be, and this is going to be hard to hear, and I had a hard time listening to it myself, 6 months of, if you were to lose your job, 6 months just to keep you on your feet. It takes a long time to build up an emergency savings, but once you have it, your whole life gets better. The stress in your life, so if your car breaks down, the roof needs a new roof, you have an emergency, you broke your arm and you got a copay of, a couple $100, you can pay it out of that emergency savings. That's important that it goes into a separate account entirely. And then the rest is the savings money, where the rest of your money goes. So that means if you're saving, for a trip, if, every extra ounce of money goes into that other account. And then if you have these 4 accounts, that's where it gets good for you to sort of have a checklist, so that you know how much money is going out and online paying, how much money is coming in, and so that you understand it. A lot of times in my past, when I had to pay bills, I was just so disorganized. I was late with them many of times because I don't know where the stamp is. I don't know where the bill is at. And for me, the world got a lot better because now everything is automated. You can get automated paying bills. Everything is on time. Every one of my bills. And I, back then, paid the bare minimum account, so I didn't get in trouble with them. Now I'm in better shape, and so I go in and I try to pay off as many things as I can. They pay off my credit cards every month, pay off, all of my bills. But she suggests, retaining control of your money. You don't want to automatically schedule things, I think, to automatically pay off everything. The idea is that you are in control. So what I did is I kind of did a 2-step system, because I don't know. I don't know if it's ADHD or just my disorganization. So what I do is, in that account, I have the bare minimum to get paid off for all my bills. Then I go and look at it, and then I pay the additional sum to pay it off completely. This way, all the bills are paid, so I'm not in trouble, but I also have control over my money and say, look, there's, whatever money on this credit card, I do choose to pay that off entirely. But that way, these companies aren't running your life. You are still in control of your money, and you're still in control of what you have. I just got, so I got my paycheck. I paid a bunch of money off, to the various accounts that I have. And it was funny because I got put into a situation, which I'm not going to really go into, where I have to be prepared that there may be times where I might not get paid for a month or 2. And it wasn't my choice to do it that way, but this is something that happened to the way my job works. And I suddenly thought, oh gosh, I wish I wouldn't have paid everything off and just kept some of that money back. So I had a couple of extra Ks in the bank in case, that happens. But essentially, like I said, she wants you to be in control of your money. I understand that, but I also understand that if I don't have my bare minimum payment automatically coming out of that account, I'm going to have a nervous breakdown. So it makes me feel comforted at night knowing that regardless of what happens to me, if I go into the hospital tomorrow, all my bills get paid and I don't have to think about it. So anyway, these are just some ideas. I like that idea of a lot of her ideas about, the towel of taking the emotional stress out of money. And then just knowing what it is you have, then, starting to break your money into those categories. I did categories much like her when I started budgeting. Like I said, this book would have been hugely helpful to me when I was going through my financial situation. But again, if you are in a place where you really need to gain control of your money, this book is for you. It's The Budgetnista. Like I said, she is, I believe, on YouTube and on podcasts, but her books are great too. I appreciate you out there listening. If you have anything to say, you can email me at jillstartwithsmallsteps.com. I have a website, jillfromthenorthwoods.com. It has all my podcasts, all the ways you can contact me. And so I have other podcasts out there. I appreciate you listening and watching, and thank you so much, as always, for being out there. Have a great day.